Hi, this is Leah Hepburn, and this is going to be the second part of the audio lecture on Chapter 14, Argumentation, relating the chapter to the persuasive essay, which is our first essay. So in Part 1, we actually ended talking about how a good thesis statement for a persuasive essay should be debatable, meaning that somebody somewhere should be able to oppose that thesis statement. In addition to being debatable, your thesis statement should also indicate exactly what your essay is going to cover or to support. So let's go back to the first example that I gave in part one, the thesis statement. Education is the best way to address the problem of increased drug use among teenagers. So if this is my thesis statement, that means that I actually have three things that I must discuss in this essay. The first thing is that my thesis statement says that there's increased drug use and that it's a problem among teenagers. So in my essay, I need to actually show that that's true. That might be using examples from different school districts or statistics from a government website or from a textbook discussing social problems, one of which should be increased drug use among teens. The second part of my thesis statement actually discusses that there's more than one possible solution to this problem. Because this is a debatable thesis statement, it means that this isn't the only answer to the problem that I'm discussing. So I actually need to show that there's more than one possible solution. So for instance, increased or harsher punishments for drug use among teenagers, possible jail time or longer suspensions from school, or harsher punishments from school districts, or whatever other solutions to this problem. I want to actually show that other solutions exist. Lastly, I need to show that education is a better solution than any of the other solutions that exist. So that might be discussing, again, statistics from different school districts or states that have developed education programs to inform their students of the consequences of drug use and how that information, that education has actually worked to help reduce drug use among teens. So again, my thesis statement was education is the best way to address the problem of increased drug use among teenagers. And that thesis statement means that I have three things to support in my essay. The first being that increased drug use among teens is a problem. The second being that more than one possible solution exists to solve this problem. And lastly, that education, just like my thesis says, is the best solution than any other one. All right, so your thesis statement should also reflect what is to come in your essay. So whatever your thesis statement is supporting, make sure that you go through it logically and pick out the different parts of your thesis statement. This will help you actually organize and structure your essay, the body of your essay. So speaking of structuring an argumentative essay, there's actually a pretty general or typical structure that many student writers and professional writers follow. And that structure is the following. So you have your first paragraph as your introduction, which introduces the issue at hand. So the issue might be gun control or the death penalty or sex education in high school. So your introduction basically gives a general introduction to the issue at hand. Your introductory paragraph also states your thesis statement. After the first paragraph, you have the body of your essay. In a 2-page paper, the body of your essay is probably going to be about 3 paragraphs. Your body would be longer depending on the length of the assignment. In the body, you have various paragraphs that do the following things. You offer evidence to support the thesis. You use logic to support the thesis. And you state the arguments against the thesis and then refute them. So remember in part 1, I described the definition of the word refute, which means to prove how something is wrong or to support how something is not valid. So in the body, you offer evidence, you use logic, and you state arguments against the thesis before refuting those counter-arguments. In a persuasive essay, you want to make sure that the evidence to support your thesis and the logic to support your thesis and the counter-arguments and the refutations to those counter-arguments all make use of the three appeals: ethos, pathos, and logos. So make sure to review what pathos, ethos, and logos are, and make sure that you're using all three of them wherever possible, because the nature of a persuasive essay is that it makes use of the various appeals in order to convince your audience. Lastly, you have a conclusion or a concluding paragraph, and in this paragraph you restate your thesis in different words and make a forceful closing statement. Many times at the end of a persuasive essay, you'll actually have some kind of call to action. So for instance, if your persuasive essay is trying to convince the citizens of Laredo to close down the maquinitas, which is kind of a hot button topic right now in Laredo, your conclusion might actually ask your readers to vote against the closing down the maquinitas, or to vote for closing down the maquinitas, whichever one you're trying to convince your readers of. But the point is that in your conclusion, you can actually ask your readers to go out and do something, a call to action. Not every essay is going to follow that structure. So that structure, again, just in summary, is your introduction, which states the thesis, your body, which offers evidence, logic, states counter-arguments and refutes those counter-arguments, and your conclusion that restates your thesis in a different way and makes forceful closing statements. Other structures of argumentative writing or persuasive writing might involve putting those opposing arguments in a different place. So for instance, if your thesis is especially controversial, you might actually refute opposing arguments first. So instead of offering evidence to support your thesis or using logic to support your thesis in your body first, you might actually move your opposing arguments and the refutation of those opposing arguments first, as the first body paragraph. And it all really depends on how controversial your topic is and what you want to achieve there. Okay, so in your persuasive essay, you're actually using a few different sources. And when you're using sources, we actually have rules of MLA documentation that we need to follow. We're going to be going over the rules of documentation in a later video, but just to touch base with how to introduce sources, you want to make sure that you actually discuss the sources that you're using. So, for example, on page 548 in your textbook, it discusses working with sources, and it mentions that you should probably have some information that introduces each source. So you can say something like, according to one expert, such challenges have been upheld by the courts. Or if you're talking about like a student newspaper, you could write something like, one student said, and then give a quote. But you want to make sure that you have introductory phrases like that that introduce the source. And then in parentheses after your quotation or after your paraphrase, you want to make sure that you have proper documented in-text citations. But like I said, we'll be going over documentation in a later video. Please make sure to view that video and read up on it in your textbook, because documentation is extremely important, especially when avoiding plagiarism or trying to avoid plagiarism. Okay, that's the last part of our audio lecture highlighting things from Chapter 14 on argumentation. If you haven't yet read the chapter, please read it. You might want to listen to the audio lecture again after reading it. Thank you very much.